RBC metabolic pathway. So class, other cells, your RBC has a metabolic way of surviving. So we will discuss that here. Now, your RBC membrane class, when you say yung membrane, your appearance, yung itsura, yung shape, yung itong part na to. Itong part na to yan. It consists of the following. It consists of proteins. 52% na proteins. Then, it serves as pumps or channels for the movement of ions and can also act as receptors and support for surface carbohydrates class. So that's the purpose of your protein. So class, if you're going to be asked, what is the most abundant constituent of your RBC membrane? The answer is your protein. Kapag naman tinanong kayo, what is the least abundant, least meaning pinaka-onte, least abundant ng RBC membrane nyo, the answer will be your carbohydrates class, which is 8%. Okay? Now, your lipids naman class, it consists 40% ng RBC membrane nyo. Insoluble siya and serves as a barrier for ion and metabolite concentrations. And then we have your carbohydrates class, which is 8% and can be found in the surface. Sir, ano ba yung mga ions and metabolites na pwedeng umano sa RBC? Class, remember your electrolytes. Your electrolytes are your sodium, potassium, and your chloride. So they pass. Meron pang mga iba, but these are the three main that move sa RBC niya. Okay? Now, let's discuss them one by one. Let's start with lipids. Class, your lipids class is composed of equal parts ng cholesterol and phospholipid that forms a bilayer. So parang dalawang layer siya, class. Ganun. Then, may outer and inner layer lang. So imagine ito yung outer and this is the inner layer. Now, your outer layer class is composed of your phosphatidylcholine and sphingomyelin. While your inner layer is composed of your phosphatidylserine and ethanolamin for the inner layer. Okay? Now, these are managed by the enzymes flopases, and scramblases for function. Okay? Composed of equal parts of cholesterol, phospholipids by layer. Outer layer nyo class composed of phosphatidylcholine and sphingomyelin. Inner layer, phosphatidylserine and phosphatidylethanolamine. Then kapag tinanong class ano yung nagmamanage na enzymes, we have your three flopases, and scramblases. Okay. Next, let's go now to your proteins. Now, we have your membrane proteins. These membrane proteins class are known as your transmembranes, which serves as channels and transporters. They provide structural integrity and support sa RBC. So ito yung mga membrane protein nyo, class. Spectrin, adenosine, dermatin. Now, your spectrin class is mediated by protein 4.1. Class, itong protein 4.1 nyo, we have what you call yung electrophoresis. So sa electrophoresis class, this is a type of a test. If you've heard of this. Ang result niyan class, merong gel. Tapos may mga bands yan na makikita nyo. So, pag nag-ano yung protein dyan sa band na yan, doon nyo siya makikita. So, that's why its name is protein 4.1. Now, your spectrin class is mediated by protein 4.1. Now, your spectrin class is your primary skeletal protein along with actin. So, if you're gonna ask, what is the primary skeletal protein? It's either spectrin or actin, alin sa choices, but if both sila, you go with them both. Then your adenosine class is your actin cap filaments. Dermatin class is your actin bundling protein. Now, your integral transmembrane class, we have your ankyrin or protein 4.1, responsible for anchorage of band 3 and protein 4.2. Component A, also known as band 3, is responsible for your anion exchange, while your aquaporin 1 is responsible for your water transport class. So aqua meaning water, aquaporin 1 is water transport. Okay? Now, your membrane carbohydrates naman class. Now, si RBC class, yung surface niya is covered by a coat, carbohydrate coat class, known as your glycocalyx. Now, si glycocalyx class, your glycocalyx is responsible for cell-to-cell recognition. Then class, take note, your glycocalyx has a negative surface charge. This negative surface charge is what you call zeta potential. And your zeta potential happens because of the presence of sialic acid. Again, class, ang tawag sa carbohydrate coat nyo is glycocalyx. Now, si glycocalyx, responsible siya sa cell-to-cell recognition. Now, si glycocalyx class, yung surface niya, di ba meron tayong tinatawag na positive and negative charge. Yung surface ni glycocalyx is negative charge. Now, this is what you call yung zeta potential. So, if you're gonna be asked, what do you call the negative surface charge of the RBC? It's known as your zeta potential. Now, si zeta potential class, it happens because of the presence of your sialic acid. Okay? Na-gets class? So pag tinanong what causes your zeta potential, the answer is sialic acid. What do you call the negative surface charge in the glycocalyx? It's zeta potential. Okay. Your RBCs are known to exhibit deformability. So I think I wrote this down sa handout nyo. The deformability refers to the ability of your RBC to change shape without puncturing or lysing or nade-destroy siya. Now, this is possible because of the biconcave shape and discoid geometry. So, class, imagine your arteries, your veins, and capillaries. They look like this. Now, imagine your RBC appearing as square, triangle. They will have a hard time passing through. But if you compare it to the RBC, which is biconcave or discoid, they have an easier time passing through because of that shape. Now, there is also the elasticity and pliancy of its membrane. Now, remember, class, its membrane is composed of your protein, your lipids, and your carbohydrates, which are very pliable or madaling mag-bend, ma-adjust. Now, there's also your cytoplasmic viscosity. For your cytoplasmic viscosity class, this refers to your presence of hemoglobin, which, by the way, class, hemoglobin is very flexible. Okay. Let's go now to the next. Now, class, si RBC nyo, walang nucleus. Thus, they lack mitochondria. Now, if you recall sa inyong mga previous subjects, sa Anaerobic or whatever zoology, who can tell me mitochondria? What is the purpose of your mitochondria? Anong ginagagawa ni mitochondria sa cell? Okay, it's your powerhouse of the cell. Now, since si RBC nyo class, wala siyang nucleus. It will rely on what you call anaerobic glycolysis for its energy. Now, what do you know, class, the meaning of glycolysis? So, can tell me the meaning of glycolysis? Glycolysis. May word na glylysis. May word na glyco. So, you can tell me. Okay, it's a breakdown of glucose to become energy or conversion of glucose. So merong 4 pathways class na ginagamit sa RBC for that. We have your EMBDEN MEYERHOF, your HEXOSE MONOPHOSPHATE SHUNT, your Rapaport Luebering, and your Methemoglobin Reductase. So let's discuss them one by one. So first is your EMBDEN MEYERHOF pathway class. This is your anaerobic pathway. It metabolizes glucose to pyruvate by consuming 2 ATP molecules, which generates 4 ATP molecules per glucose molecule. Okay, class. To simplify this, si glucose nyo, 1 glucose will produce 4 ATP. 4 ATP. Now, para ma-metabolize ni RBC si glucose to pyruvate, kailangan niyang gumamit ng glucose to pyruvate, kailangan niyang gumamit ng 2 ATP molecules. So, pag na-consume niya na si glucose class, di ba, magbibigay ng 4. Now, para siya maging pyruvate, kailangan mag-consume siya ng 2. Thus, ang matitira nyo is 2 ATP molecules. May gets? Ulitin ko, class. Si glucose nyo will produce, upon metabolization, will produce 4 ATP molecules. Now, for you to metabolize glucose to pyruvate, you will need 2 ATP molecules. So, kukuha ka ng 2 dun sa 4, ang may iwan ngayon is 2. So, kapag tinanong sa quiz nyo, if the question is like this, how many molecules or ATP molecules is the byproduct or end product of your EMBDEN MEYERHOF? The answer is 2 ATP molecules. Okay? Now, kapag tinanong kayo, what do you call the end product of your EMP pathway? EM pathway? What do you call the end product of your EM pathway class? Anong tawag? Isulat ATP. Oh, type nyo ATP. What do you call the end product of your EMBDEN MEYERHOF pathway? End product. It's your pyruvate. Huh? Remember, your glucose is being metabolized into pyruvate. Okay? Now, your EM pathway class generates 90 to 95% of the energy needed by RBC. Now, it can affect patients with pyruvate kinase deficiency class. So, if you recall, may mga babies na bagong panganak, mayroong lactate dehydrogenase deficiency, kung ano-anong mga sakit. Now, if a patient has pyruvate kinase deficiency, your EMBDEN MEYERHOF pathway will be affected. Now, your EMBDEN MEYERHOF pathway class functions in the maintenance of RBC shape, flexibility, and cation pumps. So, kapag nagkaroon si patient ng pyruvate kinase deficiency, magkakaproblema ka dito sa RBC shape, sa flexibility, and cation. So, if you're going to be asked, what disorder can affect your EMBDEN MEYERHOF pathway, the answer would be your pyruvate kinase deficiency. Next, let's go to your HEXOSE monophosphate shunt, also known as your PENTOSE phosphate shunt. Now, instead of glucose, dito naman sa pathway na to class, you will be using glucose 6-phosphate to be transformed into nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate or NADPH. It is also an aerobic pathway and it detoxifies hydrogen peroxide from oxygen reduction that destroys heme, iron and lipids containing thiol groups. It protects the RBC from oxidative injury. So class, if na-notice nyo, if nilagyan nyo ng yung sugat nyo dati ng hydrogen peroxide, di ba grabe yung bubbles, yung bubbling. Now, ang ginagawa ni HEXOSE monophosphate nyo class, i-detoxify niya na kagad si H2O2 sa body. This will prevent yung destruction ng heme, iron, and lipids containing thiol groups. Now, it affected in patients with G6PD deficiency. So kapag may G6 deficiency ka-class, intracellular oxidants can't be neutralized. And yung globin, class yung globin part yan ng hemoglobin, I will discuss that next week, nagiging nagde-denature and nagpre-precipitate to become Heinz bodies. Okay? Pag tinanong kayo, what do you call the product of globin denaturation? It's Heinz bodies. What type of pathway can you see Heinz bodies? It's your HMP pathway. Now, your Heinz bodies class will lead to RBC becoming bite cells after splenic pitting. Okay? Gets? Any questions? Okay, ulitin ko kasi, pag may G6PD si pasyente nyo, hindi siya nakaka-detoxify ng mga oxidants. That's why your globin will denature and precipitate known as your Heinz bodies. Kapag marami kang Heinz bodies, yung RBC mo magiging bite cells after splenic pitting. Okay, let's go to your third, which is your Rapaport Luebering. Allows the RBC to regulate oxygen transport during conditions of hypoxia or acid-base balance. It permits the accumulation of 2,3-DPG, which is essential for maintaining normal oxygen tension and regulating hemoglobin affinity. So more on sa hemoglobin to class, itong Rapaport Luebering yun na pathway. And then the last one is your Methemoglobin Reductase Pathway. So it maintains iron in the ferrous state. In the absence of the methemoglobin reductase or cytochrome B5 reductase, methemoglobin accumulates and it cannot carry oxygen. Ferrous iron carries oxygen, not ferric. So if you're gonna be asked, what's the form of iron that can carry oxygen? It's your ferrous iron. Okay. It's your ferrous iron. So I'll discuss this class, itong methemoglobin niya next week. We can actually that next week for our. So with that ends our RBC metabolic